So this is part 8 of my series looking at statements made by Sam Brown during the Kiely Rodni case. If you've missed the first 7 videos in this series, there is a playlist which I will link below, and there are also a list of videos which are just back-to-back statements made by law enforcement, separated into categories, which you can also go and have a look at if you want to look at them without my narrative added. So this particular video goes from the 13th of August, and we'll probably also cover some of the 15th of August. So let's jump in and have a look.
Can you or the officers behind you confirm that her phone, Kiely's phone, the last ping was near the water?
Yeah, the ping for the data points and everything were near the water. It's hard to tell an exact pinpoint or anything like that, but just as much on land as it was on water.
Okay, so we know that that line has been discussed over and over and over, so I'm not going to go into it too deeply, but to me it does actually make sense. So in terms of the data points from the phone, first of all, if they're triangulating, then they can get a fairly close area for the phone, but not always, depending on the towers, can they get it precise. Although that said, if anyone who has an iPhone will know that if you use Find My Phone when you've lost your phone, you can pretty much pinpoint where it is. I had a friend of mine who was riding to work on his motorbike, and his iPhone fell out of his pocket on a somewhat abandoned, well, not abandoned, but a stretch of road where there was, just bush and grass and, something where you wouldn't be able to see it very easily. But he got to work, he realised that he'd lost his phone. He did find my phone, and he was able to find it on the side of the highway. So he was actually able to pinpoint it well enough to find his phone on the side of the highway. So I think of that when I hear Sam Brown talking about, well, it's just as much on land as on water, inferring that they've got a close idea of where it is, but they can't pinpoint it 100%. But at the same time, I think we also need to bear in mind that the water levels were receding. So it's possible that they're looking at data which is perhaps the phone may have originally been in water and the water may have been receding, and that may also be confusing the issue as to the location of where the phone was last located. So I guess there are a lot of reasons why it is possible that this statement is precise, just as much on land as on water. Or it could also be that maybe they had located the phone, but they didn't want to say that because it had some bearing on the investigation. Or it could just be that he's just totally clueless and he really doesn't know what he's talking about.
That's what I was told, is that it was near the water and searches took place near that vicinity. Are those going to continue?
Yeah, today we have 226 searchers, a pretty astronomical number. I think the overhead team at the search and rescue, they deployed out all 226 members within about an hour, and so that's a pretty big feat on its own. They've extensively been planning and prepping overnight so that when people get here, we're ready to roll. The area has been walked, driven, flown, grid searched. They're getting into tighter grid searching to, at this point we're looking for small and anything evidence-wise, as opposed to cars, people, things of that nature, even phones. We're trying to make it even tighter. We had swimmers we announced the other day that actually did surface swimming, so we don't want to disturb the water even underneath, because that can cause its own problems, and divers have been deployed at this point as well.
It seems like the pattern here is that whenever he can't fully answer a question, he goes back to talking about how phenomenal they are in terms of what they're doing search wise. So, 200 odd people searching, and we've got divers in, we've got swimmers in, we don't want to disturb the surface. And when I was listening to him say all this, something that popped into mind for me is that from listening to the way he's saying this, it sounds like they were putting massive manpower into searching just for evidence, searching for the phone, searching for pieces of evidence, etc. And that's well and good, because that's important. But how much of all this manpower then was actually put into trying to find Kiely? Because he's talking about people searching on foot in the area. These types of searches that he's talking about here are not talking about searching for a vehicle, are they? They're not searching for a person or a vehicle. They're searching for smaller things. So all these 19,000 man hours, how much of it was spent just looking for small pieces of evidence, and how much of it was spent knocking on doors and trying to get footage from the party, or interviewing teens, or contacting parents of teenagers to find out where those teens were on the night of the party? Because he's not telling us about any of that stuff. And when he gets asked about stuff like plate readers or video footage, he makes it sound like, well, that's just too hard for us because it requires a massive amount of manpower, even though there is technology that means that you can go through several hours worth of video footage in a matter of minutes using this technology that will specifically search for what you are looking for. So, were they really looking for Kiely and her vehicle? Or were they so focused on finding the phone and any other bits of anything of evidentiary value? Like I said, yeah, important, but less important than finding Kiely at that point.
To assist in the search, and it's been pretty thorough overall. But yeah, we continue to look for that item as well. Just because it was last pinged there, that doesn't mean that that's where the phone stopped being. There's lots of reasons of why those notifications or data points could be lost.
Could you tell us what body of water and what time that last ping was?
The Prosser Lake is where we're focused on right now. But again, that doesn't mean that that's the last location.
So here he is on the 13th, so roughly a week after she went missing, saying, yeah, we are focusing on the location that the phone last pinged, which is Prosser Lake. And we know now that the location of the final ping is the location that Kiely's vehicle was eventually located. So, what's wrong with this picture? It doesn't add up, does it? To say that their focus is Prosser Reservoir, and that they are heavily focused on looking for the phone, which the last location for that, whether it was on land or on water, still the proximity there, the area where they were looking, they should have found the vehicle if it was there.
When was the ping that you had?
I think the last location known that we've put out, from I think day one is around 12:30 in the morning.
There was, this morning I was out by Prosser and there was a dive team from Alameda. But just a few feet to the side there were people recreating and people going by in a canoe. Are you not afraid about them disturbing any possible evidence that could be there?
Yeah, you balance this, shut everybody out, and we don't have evidence to say that there's something that we're going to locate. Are you better off having more eyes in the area or not? There's times where we have shut down areas. We closed off the boat ramp at one point in time to cover like certain area and ground and things like that. So,
Okay, so working backwards. First of all, I know people love to jump on him saying to cover up on, and people try to say that that is evidence that they were trying to cover up whatever happened to Kiely. But he doesn't miss a beat with that. It's not like when Megan Cole stuffs up and you know that she knows that she shouldn't have said it because she either speaks really fast or changes topic really quickly and tries to speak on in a way that she's trying to hope that nobody actually heard what she said. Whereas he actually scoffs at what he said there and corrects himself. So I think it really was just a slip of the tongue. I don't think there was anything in it. Everyone's welcome to their opinions on that. But to me, he was very calm about the way he said it. He didn't flinch about it. He didn't try and quickly change the topic or speed up in his speech. He didn't show any signs that he was worried about saying that. He was simply amused at himself for that stuff up. Now, he missed the point of what this person was asking him. He had just finished talking about, he's made it really clear that they had swimmers because they were trying to be very, very careful not to disturb the surface in case evidence was lost and covered up by mud or whatever. And then she asks him about, well, what about the other people, the civilians that are out on the reservoir right near where there were divers? Aren't you concerned about that? And he's like, we're not concerned with that. People recreating the area anyway, we can't stop them. So he's contradicting himself because there is that possibility that if they are there in the area where the divers are trying to search, that they could stir up the water and mess up the search for the divers. So he's trying to have the best of both worlds there. On one hand, he's trying to say how careful they're being to not stir anything up. And at the same time, he's saying, yeah, but we're just allowing every man and his dog to come into the reservoir and do what they like. So there's no controls happening there whatsoever. And let's remember that he has said here specifically that they did close off areas. This is the second time now that he's mentioned this because we know at a later date that he tries to backtrack and say, well, I'm not sure that we really closed off any areas.
there's always a concern, but we also don't have like a, hey, this is the area. And so at what point do you cut off the entire, Forest Service and things of that nature? So I think we've been reasonable with the areas, and times we've had to put in stop gaps to prevent people from moving around, but we do that based off of information. More people around gives us information, but they've been recreating throughout that lake since long before, and so it is tough. A diving operation like that is really almost like you're going into the water blind, and they're basically searching with hands, because once you start maneuvering the ground, it's like going through mud. So these are tough operations, and there is no right answer for everything, but that's always a concern. Everything is.
Okay, so I don't really need to reiterate what I was just saying before about the issue with civilian people stirring up the water, but here's a point for you to consider, because I know that the people who are still trying to push the narrative of Kiely driving herself into the reservoir do their best to ignore it when we point out that it was muddy and the car would have got stuck in the mud before it could have possibly got far enough in to float to deeper water where it could have sunk. But what he's just said here is he's talking about divers having to feel around in the mud. So even he is acknowledging that the base of the reservoir is mud. And he's acknowledging that if you disturb it too much, then it's going to come up and it's going to cover any evidence. Now, if that was hard-packed stuff that you could drive on and not get bogged, then it's not going to come up and wash up and disturb evidence and cover evidence. It's only going to do that if it's that kind of soft, squishy mud that if you drove into it, you were going to get bogged. So I think that is a really important thing. Even Sam Brown here is telling us what the bottom of the reservoir is like there. It's not possible to drive in to a depth where your car is going to start floating and then subsequently sink after a while, because first you've got to get through that heavy mud.
About how deep it is right now, because the water level's so low, below the natural level.
The deepest point for Prosser that I was told was 57 feet.
Thank you.
Did you have divers out there today and swimmers today?
Divers, yes, today. I don't know if they have swimmers out today. Swimmers was a precaution so that we could ensure, to clarify, because there's so many levels to this. We had boats, we had side sonars, which allow you to see things, certain types of fish finders, which can go lower down into the water.
And there again, and they're talking about Prosser specifically, he says we had boats, we had side scan sonar, we had types of fish finders, and he specifically says which allows you to see down deeper. But, let's call a spade a spade. Side scan sonar and just the standard fish finders are more than adequate in 14, 16, 20 feet of water, depending on how deep it originally was. This was a week after she went missing. This was after the water levels had started dropping. So it wasn't at its maximum level. It wasn't as high as it was when Kiely went missing. So they should have been able to find that vehicle with the side scan sonar or with the fish finders, or even going over it with the boat.
But at that point, we still hadn't touched the ground or anything like that. So swimmers on the surface allowed to use masks and see things without murking up the water, just to cover if there's something you could see. Because once you touch the ground, you could potentially have all that earth come back up over any kind of evidentiary item. So divers were the last case scenario in the attempt, because for the most part, you could go in over and over and over again, but potentially you get one shot at it. And so trying to use a phased approach that makes the most sense and gets us to where we want to be.
This is what I like to term speaking out of your ass. He's talking about all this stuff that they were doing. And talking about, we had swimmers looking down into the water because we didn't want to make it all mucky and muggy and hard to see. Well, were those swimmers blind? I know that we've heard that in particular instances they only went out to a certain depth or a certain distance, which wasn't as far as the distance that the vehicle was. But even still, theoretically, there should have been tyre marks in the mud in the reservoir. Perhaps by that stage they had washed away if there were tyre marks. But they had swimmers there from pretty much day one, according to Sam Brown. So you're telling me that the vehicle got from land to 50 something feet out, and there was no trace in between on the bottom of the reservoir that a vehicle had in fact entered the reservoir. To me, none of this is adding up.
And my apologies, I'm new to the area. How large is that lake?
I don't know. It's not a very big lake overall. It's a man-made reservoir, and I believe, as large as it is, I believe we have extremely good coverage on that lake as well.
Okay. And what's the name of the dive team?
There's a lot of teams out there, so I don't know specifically. I know Alameda was mentioned. I don't know which all teams were brought in, simply because they all showing up today, and then some have been added. But I can tell you that numerous agencies from all over California are coming up to assist. 226 searchers is a pretty large number. We're expecting the same tomorrow.
Now, wouldn't you draw the conclusion that, given that there were numerous agencies, and we saw the lists, the daily lists of the agencies that were involved, then the conclusion that needs to be drawn here is that either every single one of those agencies was completely and utterly incompetent, every single one of them, or that there was nothing to be found.
Do you expect to go back in the water tomorrow?
Depending. I mean, it all depends on coverage, right? We want to use our resources for the best purposes. There's bodies of water that we're also interested in. We've been checking, but we have to have purpose and reason for what we're using our searchers for.
Are you also calling on the public to help in these like land searches, maybe terrain searches, or is it just law enforcement right now?
Our searchers are volunteers, the majority of them, but they also go through a training. So Cal OS has a typing system, so when the sheriff's office is going to utilize searchers for a specific purpose, they have to be trained up, they have to have all these things, and they're covered under what's called a disaster service worker. So workers' comp is picked up by the state in case of things that could go wrong or injuries and whatnot, where we wouldn't be able to supply that for people in the public. And so we don't give direction, but we also provided a mapping system, CalTopo, which is a free app that anybody can download, but we've also included a map that is here locally at the family's trailer here in the rec yard or the rec center parking lot. It has a map, QR code, and then people can see where other people have searched and also contribute to the tracks.
It really does feel to me that this is nothing but PR. It's all about talking themselves up. Look at us. Look at how many people are involved. Look at how efficient we are because we train up our volunteers, and we're using this app to help us find Kiely and her vehicle. Look at how brilliant we are. Don't look at the fact that we can't find her and we have no actual direction at this point in time in terms of what we're doing with our investigation.
Oh, I just have one question regarding the CalTopo. Captain Brown, the other day you had mentioned that you were trying to also put into place a way for people to upload like GPS coordinates of where they've been and that kind of thing. Is that in place yet?
I believe that is in place, and I want to say that there was a mechanism designed and should be, I can follow up with it too and get back with you, but at the trailer I believe we had members out there to give people some instruction. There was also a system set up so that we could take the tracks, download them. Marin County was helping us to process those and get them entered. So I believe that's it's through the same app. Yeah. Great. So ultimately somebody who used a GPS unit can save those tracks, and then those can be uploaded at a later time. It doesn't have to be done through like the live tracking that's being utilized. But I've looked at the map. There are people going out. They are using it, and I think that it's helpful in a big way. But people keep asking, should I go where those tracks are? Should I not? I don't know, because somebody could walk right by a car or a person and not even know it, and that happens lots of searches and lots of times. And so there is no direction, because if I had somewhere I would send teams. We have 226 people I would send to that location, but we don't. So we just encourage people that if they see something, let us know, and then we can help follow up and look at it. Don't touch things if you see something and you're concerned about it, but let us know. And to follow on what Lieutenant Barnhart said, The search and rescue, of course, is going to have to tailor back at some point in time. But our teams, even today, this morning, are building out plans that go well beyond any point of time and continually expand. And when that time does come, we'll work on plans of how do we continue to make sure we're up in the area and having a presence, because much like the investigative side, it never stops and never ends. And this is a highly recreated area, so I would just encourage people to keep their eyes out and keep looking around and let us know if they see something. Even if it's small or little, we'll come take a look and see if it helps us piece things together.
So the simple question was, if they had put something in place for people to upload their GPS coordinates, had they been searching and saving their GPS coordinates? And he just goes on again with this long spiel about the brilliance of the CalTopo app and how, you know, we're going to have to eventually start scaling down the search, and we're having a look at some of the tracks that have been put in, and yada yada yada. He's just doing PR, in my opinion. Maybe I'm being unfair here, but it just does sound that in absence of anything solid that he can bring to the table, instead he is just doing PR, trying to make them look good when they are in fact apparently achieving nothing. Maybe they are achieving things in the background that they can't share, but it's all talking the talk, in my opinion. And the thing that bugs me is that, so that is the full amount of things that he has said at the meeting on the 13th, or the presser on the 13th. He has not once mentioned Kiely by name. The whole thing for him has been about PR, about talking up the search teams, about making the search teams look good, and saying how much they're doing and how many people are involved and how many different organisations are involved. Look at us, we're so good, but we can't find this car or this child. So that's a logical spot to leave it there. I've actually gone longer than I would normally like to. Thanks for listening. I will put up another video in this series tomorrow, so that'll be for the 15th of August. I won't push on to the 22nd. I'll do that as a separate video after that, because there's so much in that. But I will put up the next video for the 15th of August tomorrow. I'm also in the background working on videos relating to this week's Delphi sessions. It's a bit taxing doing them. There has been some major revelations. To quote one person, I think there is a wall of evidence against Richard Allen. But I'll come back to that in my Delphi videos. So thanks for listening. Hit the like button. Please leave a comment below. And if you're not subscribed, please subscribe. Give a fuck about me.